Hi, I'm Jim,
I'm Kevin,
and we are.
the Signal Brothers. Hey, welcome back to another live stream from the Signal Brothers. We hope you'll ask questions of us while we're on there. Let the questions be of the subjects that we're covering today. We love to take questions, and just know we'd love to also get you on the podcast. Right? We'd love to have you here. We'd love to have your opinions. They don't have to agree with Jim's or mine. Right? We just want to know what drives you, and we'll get you on as a guest on the podcast. And if you don't want to be there and you don't want to be on the podcast, but you have a great idea for a subject, let us know. We'll be happy to cover it. We'll do a little research, maybe discuss it with you to make sure that we understand it correctly, and we'll get you on the program. Well, without further ado, today's topic is transgender athletes,
Mhm.
specifically transgender women in women's sports. And we thought it was important to cover. It's a pretty controversial subject that's out there today. There's really two sides to the view. And before we get into facts and research, Jim and I just want to share our opinion about it, right? We have a personal opinion and we like to share a personal opinion. Then we'll dive into the facts and the background and stuff like that. So Jim, I'll shoot it over to you for you to jump in here and give us your perspective on this.
My perspective is basically, I mean, everybody's got a right to be who and what they want to be, especially in our country. That's a big thing we've always, said you can be free to be, who and what you want to be. But there's also a responsibility that comes with that. And we like to enforce one side and ignore the other. Um, while we try to be fair to everybody, this is a situation where it ends up being unfair to other people. And the problem there is, who decided that it's okay to inconvenience or make spaces unsafe for these people so that these people can be provided for? There's, in my mind, is the biggest argument. And of course, none of us want anybody oppressed or treated badly or hurt. Um, but you've got to exercise, equality comes with responsibility. You've got to exercise that equality with some responsibility. If you've got a 5 foot tall natural woman, you've got a 6'2", biological male, and they're competing together, especially in a physical sport, it don't take a great leap of the imagination to realize somebody's going to get hurt. And at that point, that's where it becomes the gray area, and you've got to exercise a little bit of common sense, a little bit of responsibility in exercising your rights. That's where I stand on it.
I agree with you, and I think the most important thing that we want to emphasize here, I think we're both united in the fact that certainly if somebody decides they want to be transgender and go through a conversion or not go through a conversion, but they feel like they're the opposite sex, we're not against that at all. That's what makes this country so great is you can do
Mhm.
stuff like that
Yep.
in this country. So we want to make it very clear to the listeners that we are not against transgender folks, right? Let's be very clear about that. The
That's
issue we're tackling today is specifically transgender women in women's sports, right? And the concerns that both of us have about that. And I am concerned about it, right? I don't think it's fair. I don't think there's enough rigorous testing, and I did a lot of research on this before we got in before once we decided to do this topic, Jim, and there is so much unregulated actions that go on in NCAA. There's a lot that goes on, right, to monitor hormone levels and all that. But if you look at what's going on in a lot of the high school sports, right, it's not regulated.
hmm
And man, I it was amazing to read about it. One of the things that really bothers me about this, Jim, is if we go back to the Me Too movement, and it's a stretch to combine the two, right? It really is because the Me Too movement's about sexual assault on women, right? And that brought that issue to light, right? That's why it's called the Me Too movement, right? And there was a lot of people affected by it. But what bothers me is that the Democrats jumped on the bandwagon for that, Jim. They did. They jumped on the
Oh,
bandwagon and
absolutely.
rode that thing, right? And now it's the same folks, Jim, that are saying, hey, right, we should, and I'm not saying every Democrat, right? Let's be clear. I'm stereotyping because there's some Democrats that are against
The extremists, the radicals.
right. So it kind of hurts my head, right? It kind of hurts my head, Jim, that you know you want to have it your cake and eat it too, and it's an issue for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to if you take the transgender out of the argument for a moment, it goes back to the same thing I was talking about. I think it was last podcast or podcast before, that if you're enforcing standards in certain areas, it's dangerous, like military first responders. If you're changing, the requirements and the standards for a different type of person, that's going to cause problems. It can cause people to get hurt or lose their lives. And I mean, I'm sorry, that's just too high a price to pay.
Yeah. And it's amazing when I did the research. One of the things that came to mind is I was having a conversation with somebody down at the dock, and we talked about this, and we both agreed. Why are the feminist movement so utterly opposed to this, right? So I did some research, and it was interesting that there are a lot of feminists that are against transgender women in women's sports, right? But there's also a large group that's not. And the reason they're not is there's a larger issue when it comes to women's sports, right? Which I was shocked to find out. And what it has to do with is that when it comes to male sports versus female sports, the money that goes into supporting it, right? All the equipment, all the opportunities for women, they are significantly less than they are for men in sports. So a lot of the folks, what I found out in the feminist movement, that are for transgender women in the sport are there because they said this is such a small portion of the larger problem for women's sports, right? That they don't want to get consumed to that. They want to address the larger issue of, hey, when are women going to get an equal, right, share of the pie when it comes to the funding and the equipment and the opportunities and the programs?
You can see that argument, but again, at what price? I mean,
I agree, and that's that's the thing that they don't talk about. And I found this one article on feminist.com. It's a really good article. It says prioritizing science while respecting social justice. Really good article about this issue. And this lady who wrote this article, feminist, 30 plus years engaged in women's sports, right? She's 60 years old. And she talks about the legacy advantage of male puberty. And she said there's a natural athletic advantage to people born male and having gone through male puberty. And it's backed by science, right? It says this can be visually seen in muscle mass, wingspan, bone length, and expressed in sports with advantage of explosive speed and strength, right? It's about getting to puberty, right? That provides that advantage.
Yeah. That
Nobody
makes sense.
wants to talk about that, Jim.
No, they don't. There's many things they don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about the negative effects or the people that detransition after they've been traumatized by being forced to trans. I mean, there's so many things they don't want to talk about. And you talk about there's not a whole lot of scientific data or any. That's because this generation is the test group.
Yes. Yeah.
These medicines and chemicals and puberty blockers and all this stuff has never been used before ever.
Yeah.
Or in the quantities so low, there's no documentation on it. So these are the guinea pigs, and you go and you can find stories. If you search deep enough, you can find stories of people detransitioning and how they talked about how they were forced into this and they're scarred for life, but nobody reports on this.
Yeah. And she goes on to talk about testosterone, right? The advantages that born male at birth. They have males obviously have 20 times more the testosterone than those born female. And testosterone produced during puberty creates an advantage in sports, increasing bone growth. We talked about muscle tissue, the amount of oxygen the blood can carry with higher amounts of hemoglobin. And it shows that that the male athletic advantage is normally 8 to 20%, depending on the sport and the event. And she even goes on to say that the difference in punching power is 160% greater for males after puberty.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Again, it goes back to what we were talking about, different standards for women and men when it comes to military and first responders. It's like, I had to do 13 push-ups to get in. 13's nothing, but I do 13 push-ups to get in the Army. Women have to do one, singular. When I got out at 31 years old, I had 17 minutes and 36 seconds to run 2 miles. Women had like 24 minutes. I mean, everywhere you look, you can see the documentation generation after generation after generation where the sexes are different. And they've been treated different up until this point. And where I think of the problem is somebody has made up their mind and they push this and it's caught on. That they want to see men and women as interchangeable, as not being different, because for some reason they think that different means less than equal. And it doesn't.
I concur with that, right?
Men have their abilities and they have their weaknesses. Women have their abilities and have their weaknesses. They're meant to complement each other.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But you can't be different because you're not equal, and that's incorrect. I mean, our strength has always been in our diversity.
Sure.
If you've been married for any point of time, you're dealing with your wife, and there's things that you miss, she catches. There's things that she missed that you catch. I mean, that's how it works. You may have different roles in your household even. That doesn't mean you're less than equal. And that's what they're pushing. They have to be equal. And to be equal, obviously there's no physical difference either. And that's going to get somebody killed.
And, when I did the research, there's a waiting period, right, from the transition, right, in the NCAA for transgender athletes to participate, right? There's a waiting period because of the hormones and all that stuff, and the levels have to be brought down, right? And so that, I think it's a step in the right direction. To be honest with you, I don't think it's going away, Jim. Even though the president's clearly on the bandwagon of going after states that are still allowing it, I think it's something that's here to stay. I think it's something that's going to develop over time, right? Mm-hmm. This is something that, whether we like it or not, right, we have our personal opinion. The reality, though, I think, Jim, is that we're going to see in the future, this is going to, we're going to learn more about it scientifically, right? And probably eventually, I remember even reading an article where they created a category for transgender athletes, but nobody would sign up to register for that. Right?
I find it interesting that it doesn't work the other way. There's no women signing up.
There are women who have that have transitioned to men and are competing in those sports. There are.
You don't hear a whole lot about that, though.
You don't hear a lot about it, and I think the difference is again, it's about the physical advantage, right, of males in women's sports, right? I think that when I say male, biological male, right? Biologically, they're a male. So I think that's the big deal, Jim, here.
Well, a lot of what...
So it's interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah. The argument, though, that will never be won, well, first off, is we've got one extreme, and we're battling it by going clear to the other extreme. I don't think that's the answer. Rolling it back to 180. That's not the answer. It's like you said, it's never going away. We got to find that middle ground. We got to find the middle ground. Taking it all the way to the other end of the spectrum is not going to work.
I agree. This is a tough thing because, I don't have any daughters, right? I'm not leading this world, right? But there are parents, there's been a lot in the news, especially in the high school realm lately about this. And again, in the high school realm, it's about the regulation of the hormones and all those additional things to not provide the competitive advantage. And in a lot
Mhm.
of the articles I read is that at the high school level that has not been regulated. And in some cases it may be, right. I mean, I can't speak
Mhm.
for every single instance, and I'm not going to try to, but I know that that's a large issue with the problem, right, is
Right.
regulating the hormones. And I think
Right.
that's super important.
I would imagine there would be a difference between, say, a 30-year-old man, already grown up, already living his life and being a man, transitioning and then going into women's sports, versus somebody who was given puberty blockers and developed as a girl. And with all those puberty blockers, the different hormones and everything, he didn't build the musculature. He didn't build the different, you know what I mean? That might be end up being two entirely different scenarios,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and that's the thing that this lady talked about in this article is that when a male is allowed to get through puberty and then transition, that they
Mm-hmm.
have a distinct physical advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And this
I
is
can see
not
that.
hearsay. This is based on medical science, right? It's not based on somebody's opinion. It's backed by doctors. And I think if people do enough research, they'll realize that that's true. And that's the issue.
Yeah. Well, the thing that always sticks out in my mind, it was one of the first things I heard about the argument, was these girls that spend their whole lives in these sports training. They come home from school, they train another 6 hours, they train all weekend long, they train their whole lives for this. A biological man walks in, takes everything away, wins everything, wipes them completely out. I mean, why don't we have a problem with our girls getting, hundreds of years, 100 years or so of all these, your grandmother and your mother and great grandma, all them fighting for women's rights. They got their sports, they're competing, they're winning scholarships to go to school to do great things, and all of a sudden, they're just knocked out of all this by this situation, and nobody seems to be bothered by this. You know,
Well, yeah. This
yeah.
is this is Go ahead, man. Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, I mean, the one woman that sticks out of my mind, and you hear a lot from her anymore, Riley Gaines. And if you've
Well, she's
listened to,
actively out there. No, she's actively out there
oh yes,
supporting it.
she is.
Okay. Yeah.
And you remember her story, because see, the thing is,
Yeah.
like you mentioned early on in the podcast, you don't have to back in the and these types of folks existed. You actually had to go through something. You had to go through a process, go through psychological this, go through physical that, have actual things done. Now, all you got to do is walk up and say, hey, I identify as a female. So now Riley Gaines, if you listen to her story, she's talking about in this locker room. She gets out of the pool, she comes in, and there's a 6'2" person standing there, woman standing there, full male genitalia, completely nude and exposed. And I was like, how is that person's rights more important than all these young girls feeling uncomfortable in the locker room?
Yeah.
Who decided that?
Well,
And
it's an issue. It's an issue, right? That's an issue that I have, and I think that's and I think what people say, Jim, is that, well, these are very few instances in where that happens, right? And
mean,
so
it's too,
what I would argue is, why should that happen at all, right?
yeah.
Number one.
What was it?
Number two, yeah. Number two, the other issue that I have is that when I did the research and I found about how 80% of the opportunities in sports, right, and funding goes to male sports, and only 20% goes to the female sports, right? So then I said to myself, I said, okay, that's fair. That's an issue that needs to be addressed, right? At the same token, why are we allowing the few opportunities for women out there to get the scholarships to attend schools for positions on college teams, high
Mhm.
school teams, that nature? We're taking that away from the biological females,
Yeah.
right? And so, if there are so few opportunities, I think we ought not to take away the limited opportunities
Mhm.
that exist.
It also makes one wonder if the male sports, which we know get so much more money than the female sports, why would you want to leave? I mean,
Yeah.
other than just to dominate.
Yeah, I don't. I would disagree about the dominant. dominating, Jim. I think if somebody makes a decision to transition, right? They didn't just decide to transition so they can be competitive in a sport. I think the first thing that happened was they decided to make a transition, right? Then, right, that came after, and they still wanted to compete, right? And they wanted the opportunity to compete, and I don't think they transitioned to get a competitive edge. I think the transition decision came first. I would think in 99% of the cases.
I would hope so, but the
Yeah.
timing. What was Leah Thomas? Was she rated in the men's swimming like 258th or something? And if she goes to female swimming and all of a sudden it's number one, I mean, who wouldn't want to make that kind of jump?
Well,
And
I think you and I will disagree on this. I think Leah Thomas decided that she wanted to be a woman, right?
And then what happens? Look how convenient it is. She didn't have to do anything to be female. Then all of a sudden, once she's done winning, she can you know what? I was right the first time. I am a male, and then no harm, no foul.
Right.
I mean, that's way too simple.
She hasn't done that. She hasn't gone back to being a male, right? Still Leah Thomas. So I think that was a lifelong commitment that she made.
Well, we do know for a fact that there are times when it's not.
Sure.
Is it in this case? I can't say for sure. But Kevin, it would not surprise me.
Sure. I could see probably at the high school level potentially, or the middle school level, that being a decision that somebody makes. I'm not saying. I think it has to do with maturity. If you would, I think that's strictly a maturity issue, Jim. If you would make that decision to compete in women's sports and say you're transgender just to get an edge, there's a maturity issue there. There's a larger issue there, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's another part of the argument is there's a whole other issue going on than just the transgender part of it.
Yeah.
And in some cases that very well could be.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's times in other, parlances that I thought, God, is this really where I should be and what I should be doing and who I am? Not to the point of changing my gender or anything, but all of us do that at some point in our development.
Right.
Is this what I should be? Is this who I should be? Yeah. I mean, I get that thought. Different people are going to take it to different, directions, but I understand the thought.
Jim, I think making a decision to be transgender is very similar to many other serious decisions that people make in their life, right? Think about it. I mean, there's a lot that comes with doing that, right?
There is.
Right? And there's a lot of social pressure, a lot of discriminatory pressures, right?
You're not going to voluntarily be discriminated against. So I understand that there's a lot going on, and there probably are some people that feel that I don't need to be, this gender. I'm sure that's the case, but as much in the forefront as it is today, there are people doing it just to remain relevant.
Yeah. I think I got to disagree with you, Jim. I don't think so. I don't think anybody would just make that transition.
It is a rash. I mean, you got celebrities now that they've got 3 kids and they're all trans. I'm like, what are the odds of that?
Yeah.
It's just, and all of a sudden, if you hear the story of a celebrity, not just trans, but a celebrity, and you can grab any number of them that have done this, and they're out of the limelight for a little bit, and all of a sudden you see a story on them, so and so has come out as gay. All of a sudden they're back in the spotlight again. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
The vanity in these people.
I think this is a little different for decided to be to make the
years ago, I'd have agreed with you.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna agree to disagree, and this is it's great that we're actually disagreeing for a change, Jim. And what we're showing people is that we can disagree and actually get along and not hate each other and hang up on each other and yell at each other like a lot of people do that disagree, right? So the good point is we're demonstrating what we set up this podcast for, right? To agree to disagree. Number one. Number two, for those people that want to come on that do disagree with a lot of the perspectives Jim and I have, here we are. disagreeing and having a good conversation, but not yelling over each other and screaming over each other and calling each other's name because we have different perspectives on the topic.
Yeah, I can do that all day long with somebody I disagree with, but those
Yeah.
people that just want to scream and yell at you, that's just, I don't even want to deal with that. I just let
100.
yourself be right, call yourself right, we're done. No.
Well, Jim, I think we've done a pretty good job covering this. I know in the last 2 weeks, there's a lot that's going on in the news that we got to cover. Where would you like to go first?
Oh my God. How about the big, beautiful bill?
That's a great one. I love it.
The
big, beautiful bill. Do you think it's going to make it through?
You know what? I'm thinking he is, but the great thing about political extremists that we've got is, depending on what you read, you'll see different versions of what this bill is going to do. You read this one publication, that bill is going to destroy America. It's going to put us all in the poorhouse. It's going to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. You read another article on it, this is a great thing. It's going to do great things for America. It's going to make, things better for the American taxpayer. And you just never know. And then what they forced that read of all 940 pages of it on the Senate floor took like 16 hours. I mean, that was a ploy there, but will he get it through? If we were more even in Congress, I would say he struggled, but still we have Republicans that are backing down from different things. So Kevin, I just don't know.
I don't think it's going to go through. And I'll tell you, this whole thing that happened with Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina today, I don't know if our readers are up to date, but because he's a no on the bill, Trump threatened to primary him, right? Put opponents up against him. So he said, he's got 2 terms under his belt. He said he's going to retire next year. He's not going to be in the Senate. And he says the issue that he has with this bill is Medicare. And he says he's got 600,000 senior citizens on Medicare in his state. And he's concerned about the impact, right, of the changes in Medicare, right? And he provided a document to of the other states. And what he's saying is, we're rushing to pass the bill. We should understand the impacts to Medicare and Medicaid, right? And understand how it's going to impact our seniors, because the number of seniors is growing every day, right? And I got to tell you, I think I agree with him on that. But the fact that he said, okay, all right, you want to have people compete against me? I'll just get out of the way, because I'm tired of the partisanship in Congress.
That's a big problem for anything.
Yeah, I mean, so he's comparing himself. Obviously, the senator from West Virginia and Nevada, right, the 2 that were Democrats that kind of bucked the line, and he's that guy on the Republican side, right? He wants to work with people. He wants to work across the aisle, and he said, hey, if I have to deal with a bunch of nonsense, I'll just get out of the way and go back to living my life, right? I'm not going to be here and play these games. Got to give the guy credit, right?
Yeah.
Stood up and he called it for what it is.
Yeah, Edwards says that Rand Paul voted no also.
Yep. So Rand Paul was going to vote no. I mean, he was the first guy who said no.
Well, the whole thing with the Social Security, the Medicaids, and all that, I mean, from what I've read, I mean, not specifically related to the big, beautiful bill, but in general, is the only thing that's affecting are the people that shouldn't be on it in the first place. And Kevin, that's what I do for a living. So I've heard no big ruckus on that being a problem.
Yep. And I'm not saying it's a problem. What he said is we ought to take a look at that before we pass this bill and ensure that we don't impact it. That's what he's simply saying. He's saying you're pushing this across the finish line now, because Trump's given a deadline of July 4th to get it done. And I'm asking everybody to take a look at it, because as it is, I'm going to say no, because I don't know enough.
Well, to be honest, if you give Congress any time to do anything, they'll take forever. So, I mean, I get it. I get it, right? And what was it Pelosi said? That we got to pass it to see what's in it. Like, okay. Yeah. Big, beautiful bill.
So I don't think it's going to go through, and I'll just tell you why. So the Senate parliamentarian, right, knocked things out of the bill, which they have the right to do. They've been, even though they're not elected, they've always had that right to do that when it's tied to budget, right? Things that can be knocked out of the bill that don't exactly go with the bill. And I think by the time they reconcile the bill with the House, right, I think the House is gonna shoot it down too. So I think if there's any changes to the bill, there's going to be an impact, and it will not get passed.
Mm-hmm. I just the way people and this actually is a good sign because we got Democrats voting on the side of Republicans and we got Republicans voting against. So if we're going across party lines, that's a good sign. We can get away from the bipartisanship.
Right.
But with that going on, I think it's too close to call. I wouldn't feel safe calling it because, you know, it could go either way at this point.
Understood.
Yeah. But we'll see.
Where are we going next?
Hey, since we're talking about Medicaid, let's keep doing that. What was it? Sure. They just SCOTUS just said that states have the right to block Medicaid funds from Planned Parenthood. How about that one?
Yeah, I find it interesting. Oh, we do have a comment. I didn't even pay attention. Oh, yes. So there we go. Ed said Rand Paul voted no too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And here's why. There's a lot of other stuff that's done at Planned Parenthood.
Yes. That's always been my argument.
Right. Besides abortion. Right. That's not the only thing that happens at Planned Parenthood. So I would say, right, if you're a state where the state has voted to make abortion illegal or limited or whatever, then I would say the state has the right to limit funds for what the funds they give Planned Parenthood are used for, right? So that would be my take on it, Jim.
Mm-hmm. So some oversight as opposed to a strict cutoff.
Yeah, why cut them off, right? There's a lot of other good stuff that goes on. Everybody just thinks about the abortion piece. They don't think about the rest.
See, I've had detailed arguments with that, and I've told people different things that they do, and people have told me I need to get my facts straight. And I was like, well, I'm going to tell you something, buddy. When I was first in the Army and my children were being born and everything, we Planned Parenthood showed my wife at the time how helped her breastfeed, helped her with filling out forms to get her WIC and everything, all that taken care of, pregnancy tests, prenatal care. I mean, counseling. I mean, they have all kind of services, not just the abortion. But everybody's stuck on the abortion. They think that's all they do. And like you said, it's not. They provide many services, not to just women, but to their families.
Right. Exactly.
And my family has actually used them.
Right. And that's my issue. Just cutting off a program that helps families. Right. I'm not okay with.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I get it. You know, my feelings on abortion go back and forth. I'm so wishy-washy on it. It just, I don't even want to get into it. But is it worth cutting off all the other stuff? I don't think it is.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're pretty much uniformed on that, Jim.
Yeah, and we're back to agreeing. See how that goes?
Yeah. Where would you like to go next, Jim?
Oh God, how about the Congo? Congo and Rwanda. Yeah, the peace talks. Where'd it come from? That's just going to seem like it come out of nowhere.
I wasn't tracking it until I got it.
No, I wasn't either. And now they're talking Peace Prize nomination for him again for doing that, like a 30-year war. I'm like, where did this even come from? That's crazy.
So I think it's a little early for that. Proof's in the pudding that they're not going to fight, right? And they're not going to. And I don't think it'll be perfect in the beginning.
Yeah,
but I definitely think it's okay. I'm wondering what is really behind the deal too. What caused that to happen? I would love to know the details.
Oh, he's a businessman. We've got to be getting something out of it.
Yeah.
We're getting something out of it. I just don't know what it is yet.
Well, what I'm hoping, Jim, is that we're investing in those countries. China's there investing in those countries, right? And I'd rather we be investing in those countries, right? And we have an influence on those countries versus China or Russia, right? I
Right.
think it's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. But it'll be interesting to see where that goes, because he's not going to do something for nothing.
Sure.
He's not going to do something for nothing. You pick the next one.
I want to talk about what's been going on with immigration and deportation.
Yeah, that's still a big
So there's
one.
been a lot going on with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and I've looked at Trump's popularity as far as his stance on immigration, and his approval rating released, I believe it was this Thursday, has 57% disapproval. And I think it's because there's so many people being right. Listen, man. You and I've talked before. The violent gang members, the criminals, get them out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm talking about there are military members that their spouses are being deported. I've read more than one case about the spouse being deported, and I'm not okay with that, to be honest with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, follow the process. If there's a reason, I'm good with that. But the fact is, you can't even get in contact with your spouse, man. Right? You don't even know what's going on. You don't even know when they're going to get out. You don't even know what the process is. And I think that's why people are so sour about what's going on.
Well, I don't understand how that even happens, because if you're married to a citizen, I mean, that automatically gives you a foot in the door. It shouldn't give you a foot out of the door. You know?
Well, there are families. There's a yeah. How about a veteran? There's also a veteran. His wife got picked up and locked up, and so I'm just saying, there's so much other stuff to focus on that I think we've gone a little too far on this. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think we've gone way too far. So I'm concerned. And then our friend came back. You want to talk about that a little bit? AB.
It's exactly what I said would happen. He came back. He was in custody. The judge released him, which is exactly what I was afraid of. The judge released. Now, the last I read, ICE and everybody, they stopped that. They grabbed the hold of him, but the judge released him, and that's exactly why I didn't want him to come back, or anybody like him to come back, because I knew once they got here, they just shove him back on the street again. And we don't need them. We don't need them on the street. That's why I didn't want them to come back.
I think this is an area we disagree. I think he should have been bought back, right? And the fact is, if the government's really got a case against him, present your case, right? Do what you got to do. If he needs to be arrested, if a grand jury can indict him for the gang connections and human trafficking, then follow that process, right? But let's not confuse or cross over them.
Well, the base problem goes back to the fact that the judges and the courts release too many people anyway. Even legal citizens, when they get, accused of murder or accused of this violent crime or that violent crime, they just send them on their way on their urban cognizance, put them, and people get hurt again. So it's not just the immigrants this is happening to, which is why my concern was, when he comes back, he's going to get in front of the judge. The judge is going to kick him to the curb, and he's right back where he started from, right back with a potentially dangerous person running around society. I know there are already dangerous people, but one that we know of that shouldn't even be here. If the system worked the way it should, I'd be right on board with you. I bring him back and make him go through it, but it doesn't work right, because we release people all the time that shouldn't be released, knowing that they reoffend, knowing well and good that they reoffend, we release them anyway. So of course we're going to release somebody like that.
We've yet to charge him with anything. So that's why I think the judge released him. Right? Has he been formally charged with any crime?
Not that I'm aware of.
I think the judge made the right decision. Whether we like it is one thing, but if you right, he's been rumored to be associated with MS-13. He's been rumored to be involved in human trafficking. But where are the charges, the formal charges on him for them?
What was it Democrats say about gun control? They say if taking away guns from everybody saves one life, isn't it worth it? Doesn't that apply to other things? I mean, it goes back to the same thing. Why do these young girls? Why does this one guy have more rights than the young girls he's around? Same thing. Why does this one immigrant have more rights than the people in the community that he's around that he could be a potentially threat to?
He could be a potential threat, but he hasn't been charged with anything. He hasn't been charged.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the issue, right? Is there's lots of claims, but there's no actual grand jury or no indictments against him for those crimes.
Yeah.
Right.
And unfortunately, we know how it works even with citizens. It just.
So it goes back to. Right. Goes back to the conversation you and I had a couple of podcasts ago, and let's take it away from the legal system. Let's just talk about a U.S. citizen, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Would you want to be locked up because somebody thinks you might have committed a crime, Jim?
Well, of course,
even though you haven't been formally charged.
Well, of course not. But I mean, I don't know. It's a slippery slope. I mean, either way you go, it's just. I mean. The two big things are you got to say I'm a potential threat. I could be interpreted as a threat. I'm interpreted as a threat in the country that I'm a resident, that I am a citizen of.
Yep.
He is not. To me, he's their problem. I'm our problem. He's their problem.
Understood.
Understood.
Tough. There is no right answer to these questions.
Mm-mm.
I just think there has to be a process in place for anybody who is arrested for being here illegally for them to go through. There's got to be a formal process. I understand that millions of people came to this country without going through a real process, right? They were processed and let in. I got it.
Mm-hmm.
But we're a country of rule and law. We're talking about this, you and I, right? And if you want to get them out, there's got to be a process to follow. What I don't see is a process. And I don't blame the president. Who I blame is the Congress, because the Congress needs to focus on reform in our immigration laws.
Yeah, I mean, they just let them pour in. Even if take aside Biden's thing and just let this happen. Congress should have been there to say, hey, why are we letting millions and millions of questionable people flow into this country?
Yeah.
And they didn't. They're in their gated community, so they're safe. They don't have to interact with these, whatever dangerous people that are coming in. And it goes back to that same thing. If you let in 100,000 people, they could all be great people, hardworking people, and they can contribute. What about the one that snuck in with them? Is he one too many, or is that just collateral damage? I mean, what are you going to call that? You don't want that one in. If one's too many, you don't want him in.
Well, that leads into our another subject, which is about Iran, right? And the ceasefire, us bombing Iran. All that happened since our last podcast.
Yep.
But there's definitely concern about sleeper cells being in the United States from Iran, and yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, that we're let right in without any immigration control.
100%.
Yep.
So, what will they be up to? That's the question.
And how are we even going to identify them? And we can't identify them until they act.
Yeah.
And we can't racially profile.
So
it's like you see people and like, well, this person, let's check him out. It's like, that's an 87-year-old woman with a hunched over back. That's obviously not a terrorist. We can't, so we got to check everybody. That don't work. I get it. I get why we don't do it, but not doing it doesn't work either.
Yeah. Well, do you think the ceasefire is going to hold though, Jim?
I hope, but you got to realize where you're talking about. These countries have been at war with each other for millennia. Over what? A perceived holy land that they all want and claim to own, or has it branched off to so many other little conflicts that nobody even knows anymore? Either way, they've been at war since before we were here. They were gone. Will the ceasefire hold? It may, but I don't know for how long.
It was funny. I was watching several videos of past presidents and their stance on Iran. And they all said, Iran cannot get the bomb. Iran cannot get the bomb. Iran cannot get the bomb. Right. But, guess what? Sooner or later, they're going to get it.
Yeah. Well, if we have past officials giving them uranium and truckloads of cash or plane loads of cash, I mean, yeah, they're eventually going to get nukes.
Yeah. What's your opinion about the bombing? Do you think we were as successful as the administration claims, Jim?
I do. I don't have any reasons to doubt it, but its long-term effect, I don't know, because I did see a story recently where it doesn't show any evidence that we got their uranium. So I don't know how effective it will be long-term, but it definitely threw a monkey wrench in their plans.
Yeah. I'm just going to share my opinion. They knew it was coming. They knew we were going to bomb them, and they moved everything out of those bunkers, as far as I'm concerned.
I wouldn't doubt it, but who do you think leaked? I know who they think leaked it.
Well, I mean, it's not about leaking. We were talking about a decision that we might do it, right? Mm-hmm. And that, to me, could have been enough information for them to say, hey, we better move stuff to some, and who knows? Maybe there are other sites that we're not aware of, even though we have great intelligence, right? There may be other sites we're not aware of where there's production going on. So who knows?
Go. We got a question back to the transgender topic.
Awesome.
Any thoughts on what's preventing transgenders from starting a sports arena that appeals to the population that wants to see a transgender compete? That's similar to what you said a little bit ago, Kevin.
Absolutely.
There was an attempt to make a transgender league or whatever you want to call it, and
category for the Olympics. Yep.
Yeah, nobody wanted to deal with it. Nobody wanted
to deal with it. That's absolutely correct. They didn't get anybody signing up. I think, Chris, it's a great question. I think it's just a matter of time before that becomes potentially the middle ground, right?
I mean, that is the obvious solution.
Right.
That is the obvious solution to me. But then imagine the type of competitions you're going to have. And I'm not talking about the sports. The sports will obviously be the same, but the people that transition, they're going to be of greater, size and strength differences than what we already have. I mean, but I do think that is where it's going to end up, and I do think that's a good compromise. But will it have the same problem as women's sports, not getting enough funding?
More than likely, if the women's sports are not getting enough funding, right, and enough opportunities, right, the opportunities for the transgender class will probably be even worse. And that's that mindset that, I told you about the split in the feminist movement, is that, right? The focus on the funding and all the lack of opportunity that exists for women. Yep. Great question, Chris. Thanks for that.
Hey, Kevin, I got one for you.
Yep.
This is one we do not agree on, so I'm going to throw it at you. How about this one?
Sure.
Justice Department fires 3 prosecutors involved in January 6th.
Yeah. They're government employees. They're government employees, Jim, following the direction of the administration who was in charge at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No argument there.
So I don't know enough about their status as a government employee, right? But they got fired. Okay, move on and do something else. The fact that you were involved in that means you have a pretty good resume, and I'm sure that you'll make great money doing other things. Is it right? I don't know. I don't know enough of the details, right? Of course, it makes, here's the things, Jim, it makes headlines, right? It's shock and awe in the news, right? But what are the details? What was their status as government employees? What did their what is their, which category are they under? How were they involved? Did they cross the line in their job? did they go too far? Did they do anything wrong in the process to prosecute? So there's just not enough information for me to really make a decision, and I'm not going to get emotional about something I don't have enough details on. Does that make sense?
It does. It was one that just kind of popped up. I was surprised to see it. And I don't know. I mean, like you said, I mean, they're just following the directions of their leaders at the time. I get that. But yeah, I think more is going to come out about that. Hopefully more comes out about it.
Sure.
But yeah.
So the last thing we haven't covered was the Supreme Court's ruling about federal judges, right?
Yes. Yes.
And their authority to apply it broadly. That's pretty. I think it's good. I think it's going to change a lot, right? It's going to change a lot of how a lot of things are being done with judges making rulings now.
I read where somebody said, well, thanks to that ruling, now we do have a king. You see that one? I thought that was pretty funny. But I mean, you think about it. You think about it. I mean, in my lifetime, I have not seen any president who has had everything he's tried, good or bad. We haven't even figured it out yet, whether it's good or bad. Everything he's tried blocked at every level by everybody. Lawsuits down to judges. Down, like, really? We're not even going to examine if this is going to benefit the American people or not, because it's Trump. We're just going to shut it down. Yeah. I was like, okay, we got to reel you guys in a little bit,
So 23 states, I forget what the ruling was about. Was it about birthright that 23 states can still continue to sue, but the other 27, right, are exempt from it? They don't get involved, right? In it now.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So it should be interesting, Jim.
Yeah, and it's interesting to read the stories and read the commentators and read how each one of them interprets the 14th Amendment. That's just, yeah, that's great. You just don't know. And I think, a lot of that's by design to keep us confused at our level. I mean, we just got to take their word at something, keeps us guessing and keeps us hopping toe to toe and keeps us arguing with each other. I don't know that they even know.
Once again, right, everybody wants to point the finger at the president, but I think people need to look at Congress and expect better from Congress to come up with a comprehensive immigration reform bill, right? I think that's what's needed.
Well, when they do that, what's going to happen? The first time I remember happening, it probably happened before, but this is the first time I remember, it was back with Reagan. They just said, well, to make this easy, we're going to get these immigration bills passed. But for everybody that are already here, let's give them all amnesty. And it was like, what, 11 million, 12 million people back then they give amnesty to? And I'm like, you just told all these people that, you're okay. The guy next door to him that spent the last 20 years and every dime he had spending to get here and do it right. You just gave these guys a free ride, So that's going to happen. If we come up with a comprehensive bill, which we need absolutely, it's going to include a large degree of amnesty. And we still know, and we're still finding immigrants that are a criminal threat that we need to get out before we can give anybody any amnesty, But you're right. It does. We do need to do something about that. But it's never going to happen when they come, because illegal immigrants. Let me make sure I'm clear on that. Illegal immigrants benefit one party a lot, so they're never going to join up with the other party to, say, hey, let's stop them from coming in. They're not going to do that because it benefits them too much. Why would you slit your own throat? It's the same reason why we can't get term limits approved. Who's going to cut their own job?
Sure.
That's my thought anyway.
There was one more subject that happened this week, and I forgot about it, but it's somewhat significant, and that was the mayor's race in New York City. Everybody expected Cuomo Andrew Cuomo to be the guy, right?
Yeah, we would.
And he was on his comeback tour, right?
Mhm.
And this guy, Mamdani, comes in and gets, nobody got 50%, but he got, I think, what, 40 something percent of the vote.
Yeah.
And he's another Democratic socialist. And he is committing to going after the white rich. These are his words: richer and whiter neighborhoods.
Yes.
Right
Saw that.
after the businesses. Right. These are words that he is saying. And all I'm going to say about that is when you target certain categories, whether it be richer, whiter businesses, you're going to drive a lot of that money out of the state.
Yeah. Can you imagine? I'm sorry.
No, good.
I thought you were done, but can you imagine if you said that about any other class of society? We're going to target black people. We're going to target gay people. Can you imagine the blowback on that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's racist as can be.
Well,
but
yeah, I think he's playing on emotions. He's another socialist Democrat. He lives in the same world as AOC and Bernie Sanders. So welcome to the socialist democratic world where we got to make everything equal for everybody. So should be interesting. To see how this turns out. Jim, one of the things you and I haven't talked about is our topic for 2 weeks from now.
No, we haven't. Any thoughts?
No, I was hoping that some of our listeners would send some ideas our way.
All right. Well, we got obviously got Edward listening. What do you guys think?
I'd be interested to know what the viewers want us to cover. Right? We keep coming up with subjects, and we have strayed into an area where we're getting to more controversial stuff now. So I'm interested in taking on controversial stuff, but I also need time to qualified immunity and bail reform. Okay, Colin.
Wow.
I'm going to have to do some research on that.
Absolutely. I would need to do some research on that.
Yeah. Well, I think we should. Do that. I think we have some precedents in LA, and I think we have some precedents in some other states where they've tried to do this, and I think it's a good area to cover.
Qualified immunity and bail reform. All right, I'm game.
I'm game too. I think it'll be interesting.
All right, you heard it, folks.
Well, Jim, I think we've run the gamut on quite a few things today.
Indeed, we covered a lot of stuff.
All righty. Well, I appreciate the folks that were listening in. Wow, even Ed says he likes the idea of qualified immunity as well. So should be interesting.
All right.
We'll definitely get into it. Well, I'm Kevin.
And I'm Jim.
And we are
the Signal Brothers.
Thanks for listening, folks. Have a good one.
Thank you, folks.